Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the program, and thank you for joining us tonight, and I appreciate that. There's so much going on in this country, in this state, in this world. It's hard to keep up with everything. I try to address one thing at a time, but it doesn't always work so well. Before I introduce my guest tonight, one of my favorite guests, I wanted to just bring a few things to your attention in the event that you don't already know or just are too busy to notice. Did you know that there are 32 states in the United States, more than half, that have made English the official language of their state? Now, why is that a good idea? I think it's a good idea because when people come from other countries, hopefully to become hardworking citizens, it benefits them, if they don't speak English, to learn our language so that they can become productive, self-sufficient, contributing citizens. But if the other side of that is that this nation prints documents in like 30 different, maybe more than 30 different languages. That is nonsense. And you and I are paying for that. We have to expect that when people come to this country, that they want to assimilate and become productive citizens. And in order to do that, they need to learn English. So why haven't we stood up to keep English the official language of our country? And it's happening state by state because these other states who have made English their official language understand how valuable a thing that is to do. It's valuable for the American people. It's also valuable for people who come here from other countries and need to learn our language to be productive. Okay, enough of that. The other thing I wanted to mention, in case you don't know, 27 states in this country have a right to work law. What that means is if you work for an organization, a company that is unionized, you do not, by law, have to become a union member in order to work there. And a lot of people aren't interested in being a union member. And sometimes unions get carried away and they take over control of the business and what the employees can do and can't do and so forth. So I think it would be beneficial to this state if we had a right to work law. Okay, I'll let it go for now. I have umpteen topics here that I could bring up, but I also have a guest here. Oh, wait a minute, before I introduce my guest, it's always one more thing, Linda. We need our federal government to get out of the healthcare system. There is not one word in the U.S. Constitution, which is the law of our nation, that gives the federal government any responsibility to do with health care of the people. So they need to get out of it. And the other thing that the federal government has no right to be in is education. That is a state and local responsibility. And the federal government has taken over way too much power and control over our youth, over our health, and over our money. So we need to shape up the federal government and start rebelling and letting them know that they have no right to be involved in these entities. Okay. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend. What's your name again?
I'm Mary Hahn Beerworth, and I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Right to Life Committee.
And for how many years, Mary?
This will be year 20. Well, I've been as a volunteer way back into the 1980s.
Wow.
And, but I was hired in 1996. And I have a couple of did you knows for your audience, if you don't mind.
Good, go for it.
Number one, did you know that the symbol of the pro-life movement is a red rose? And number two, did you know that today is Linda Kirker's birthday?
Yeah.
So I have a red rose for, I'm going to walk over here just to put it beside you.
Oh, Mary, you didn't, that's beautiful.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Oh, look at that, folks. And my favorite color.
Oh, good. It matches your blouse.
Oh, I'm blessed.
Well, I'm blessed to be here on your birthday. And Linda Kirker, one more thing, did you know? We're very glad you were born.
Well, I'm glad too, because it's been a challenging but a very enjoyable life, rewarding in many ways and, difficult in other ways, but that's how you get through life. You work through the positives and the negatives. And I
think you were someone who never thought life was easy street, but you've been a joyful person to know, and I'm grateful to know you.
Oh, Mary, thank you so much.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. I didn't expect you to do that, but that's what makes it all the more special.
There you go.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. You're very sweet.
Well, I'm glad to be here tonight.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I didn't show. I think I missed one.
Not just for the flowers either. So why don't you share with the folks what is going on these days with right to life, abortion, all kinds of things that the folks need to have a grasp of, and then we have to fight for the good things.
Well, it's been a really onerous couple of years. They rammed through the State House in 2019, H57, which some of your listening audience may remember, sanctioned in our statutes legalized abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. And so that was state sanctioning in our law. So that's in there. But that wasn't enough for them. They now are pursuing amending the Vermont Constitution for the first time in its history, the major body of our Vermont Constitution, with language that would embed that same concept of abortion throughout pregnancy into the language of our founding document. Now, and it also means much more than that, but I want people to contemplate that means that if the unborn child has zero value in the state of Vermont, and once that's embedded in the Constitution, if we can't stop it, what that opens the door to for that unborn child is it's actually sickening. And it's much bigger than that, and those who want this amendment and very clearly state they want much more than just abortion. We're looking at the possibility of going to court over major battles about life, about protecting unborn babies, about everything from sterilization and transgender surgeries, and maybe perhaps all of Vermonters paying for all of these, whatever it could also mean. Surrogacy, three-parent embryos, it can open the door to a nightmare. The language is personal reproductive autonomy. The language is guaranteeing Vermonters the right to carry a baby to term, to be sterilized, to have an abortion, or to and access to family planning. But personal reproductive autonomy, Linda, could mean much more than that. So we got a huge job ahead of us. So the process is well underway. In 2019, it did the first phase of a constitutional amendment, and that first phase requires the Senate to come up with the language, and then pass it by a majority, move it over to the House, pass it there. Then there has to be an election in between, and we've done that. 2020 was the election in between. We did pick up a few seats, so we're grateful for that, and some fighters. So not enough, but there's some fighters there. And they had promised leadership in the Senate. President Pro Tem Rebecca Balint had promised that they would not take it up this half of the biennium. They would take it up next year because they were going to deal with the COVID crisis. Well, they've done almost everything but anything to do with COVID. So they whipped it up at the last minute just a few weeks ago. We had no preparation time. And they threw it out on the Senate floor, and it did pass. Now that that's behind us, it moves to the House. They're saying they're not going to take it up until the next biennium. They could they still could do it. Leadership, it's supermajority, and leadership, they can do anything they want.
When I hear discussion of this topic on television, I always get this thought in my mind: what don't they understand about the word reproductive? That means you're reproducing. You're not killing, you're creating.
But unfortunately, it's a term. Well, we've asked national scholars, and the national, constitutional scholars are telling us it absolutely will mean abortion throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. So that part is clear. Personal reproductive autonomy is clear. It means before, during, and after.
Why don't they call it, instead of reproductive, which means you're creating something, why don't you make it killing?
Well, we testified intensely against this notion, and there was one area of agreement with the ACLU, the Attorney General's office, the Legislative Council, and Vermont Right to Life, is that they should use the word specifically abortion somewhere in the purpose section or in the final language. And they declined. And they very specifically said they wanted it to mean more than that.
Yeah, they wanted to sound like it was positive.
And deceive people into voting for it. So, I mean, I can't imagine. Would you like me to read the one sentence that this would put in our Constitution? That an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is central to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. I can promise this listening audience there isn't a court in Vermont that would find any restriction or regulation on the practice of abortion that would reach a compelling state interest by the least restrictive means. It's gobbledygook. They want to embed into our Constitution and part of this abortion language that will shield the abortion business, which is Planned Parenthood has a monopoly on that business. They will permanently shield them from any scrutiny by the legislature or anything that would restrict or restrain their business, and we will never know what they do or how they do it. I think this is probably the most dangerous thing that Vermont is facing, and we need to educate each other and get this knocked out.
It's no respect for life.
It's zero respect for life, but it's so much more, and it could so negatively impact Vermont in ways that we can't anticipate. There's no age limit in this language. Does that mean a 12-year-old girl without her parents can decide to be sterilized because she's concerned about climate change? Does it mean that we pay for sterilizations and then, they change their mind, and then we pay for the reversal of the sterilization? I mean, there was no look at a potential funding impact of this language. We already do pay for about a third of the abortions that are performed in Vermont, and it is my very considered opinion that under something that guarantees personal reproductive autonomy, we'll be paying for all of it.
I have a hard time understanding the terminologies in general, okay? Planned Parenthood. That means you're planning to be a parent.
Well, it's very deceptive. And no one knows what they do and how they do it and how they are in our schools and how they are influencing our children.
Well, I do know that, I believe on good source, that middle school children, 11 and 12, can access condoms
Yes.
in the nurse's office.
We are the first nation in the state to go down that road.
So what is that telling them?
Well, the legislators, I guess, thought it was telling them to be careful, but in fact, it's telling them to have permission to have sex, and everybody knows that a condom is your least likely protection against pregnancy.
Exactly.
So, mixed messages are sent to children in this state all the time. I can't imagine how confusing it is. The new front for Planned Parenthood is some of the transgender questioning. They are able to prescribe, as I understand it, they're able to prescribe the hormones for kids. I don't believe there's any parental involvement law here on that level. So at these young ages when they should be just having fun, isn't it? It's just sad what we're confronting our kids with.
What has happened to our society? Where is the respect and the positives and teaching children so many other things than condoms?
I don't know. It's very dismaying. I would like to go back and finish the process for the constitutional amendment for the listeners. So it was the one biennium had to pass both houses. We're in the second biennium, and it's already passed the Senate. Now it passes the House, but it does require a public hearing. So I'm hoping people listening will be prepared to hear about that public hearing and be very prepared to call your member of the House. One of the confusions for lawmakers is that they sometimes think the people should have a right to vote on it, so you're sending it to the voters to decide. But when the language is so unclear, so vague, so unpredictable, that's asking. I think it's irresponsible for legislators to allow it to go to the ballot for a yes or no vote the way that this has been written. So you will have a chance for a public hearing, and then in November of 2022, it will be on the ballot for a yes or no vote. And to get something like this out is, to change it is the same process. You would have to go through this huge 4-year-long process in order to reverse that.
Is this Prop 5?
This is Proposal 5.
Okay. So I'm wondering, when was the last time, I'll ask the viewers this, when was the last time that your elected representative called you and asked you, or had a local meeting and asked you what your views were? Because they're representing us, supposedly. So when do we get our voice?
Well, they weren't. So I want to say this. I was involved in the last attempt to amend Vermont's constitution that failed. And that was in 1986. It was called the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. Again, deceptive language that was heavily laden in favor of having unlimited, unregulated abortion. That was the big center of that push. Now, that was passed out of the House and Senate by, there was a 25-5 vote in the Senate in favor, and in the House, 125-24 in the House. So we actually had a bigger fight back on this one than we even had all those years ago. So it came out, went to the public public opinion polls at the time placed it at a 75% chance of that it would pass by 75% of the vote, and it failed. So we have a huge monumental. I was involved in that fight. It was a time-consuming, expensive fight, but it failed, and that meant the ERA failed in the country as well. That was an attempt to ratify the Vermont Constitution, but also to be part of a train that was going to ratify the U.S. Constitution. You had to have 2/3 of the states in order to get the U.S. Constitution ratified. So it's not hopeless. The voters and the senators and House members were out of touch with their constituents in 1986. They seem to be out of touch now. The Senate vote this time around was 26-4, but that was a pickup of 2 seats. One who had voted yes last time and had learned more about it and voted no, and then a new seat that was picked up in Essex Orleans by someone who's very thoughtful and very helpful in the Senate. So now we move on to the House and see if we can turn some votes and make our arguments and build our case. But
You have a full-time job.
well, this isn't all we do. At the same time, they're attempting to expand the assisted suicide law we have here in Vermont, Linda, and I think you're very familiar with that debate. I remember as a nurse you were very concerned. And it passed very narrowly. There was only 2 votes in the Senate that allowed passage of making Vermont the 3rd state in the nation to have an assisted suicide law. That's a doctor-prescribed suicide law. But proponents at the time said, we're going to put all these safeguards in. We're going to protect vulnerable and elderly people from being pressured into having, ordering up the lethal dose. And we're going to make sure they're freely deciding and then all that. So now guess what? Fast forward from 2013 to now. Now they want to take all those safeguards out, and they actually want you to be able to order your lethal dose by phone. So who's be checking on the elderly mom whose kids don't really want to deal with her failing memory anymore, and they want her will settled in their favor? By phone, is anyone really going to know what kind of pressure she's facing to end her life when maybe it was against her conscience? And
Wow.
Yeah. We'll be battling that very soon.
What are we doing in this
unbelievable.
state and even in this country? Where's the respect for the human life?
I think we've been losing respect for life for a long time, Linda, and it seems so quietly done.
But we're welcoming all these foreign lives into the country, but we're enacting laws that support doing away with, so to speak, killing our own race.
Well, the only possible good news there is that some of those cultures really do revere life, and they may teach us a thing or two about it. But
Well, I hope they learn English.
so they can tell us about it. But certainly the Hispanic culture, they love their family. I mean, so we'll see how all that pans out. But right now we're facing an elderly population. All the lawmakers talk about elderly, and they're so vulnerable. We talk about them being vulnerable all the time. Now we have COVID, and now we're going to lighten up, and somebody who's scared of a positive test for COVID is impulsively going, they want to also take away the 2-week waiting period. They want to shorten up the time that you think you might have to die. It's unbelievable to me that we could. And they want to open up the prescription process to more healthcare workers and grant immunity to anyone involved.
The prescription process.
Well, they're using more and more non-physicians to do everything. There's so that's not too unusual.
Give me an example.
Planned Parenthood physician assistants, nurse practitioners, nurse midwives all do the abortions. You don't see a doctor 9 times out of 10. And there's a lot. You're seeing a lot of aides, kind of, and they're capable of a lot of things.
How can they live with
But this is
themselves?
something, when you're talking about getting a lethal dose to end your life, we need to be looking for depression. We need to be looking for what the home situation is like. We need to be looking for bad actors. It is very disheartening. It's very disheartening. And they have the votes. So we can go in, and we will. We'll build our case. I will say this. Vermont Rachel Life understands completely that we are working for the historical record. The history, we're looking for the history. We know what they said. We're transcribing what they say. And if they're not listening now, then as they've apologized for some of their behaviors in the past and fixed legislation that they hurried through.
So you're keeping a
We're
log.
keeping track. And they'll be apologizing for this someday. The world isn't always going to look like this.
After the damage is done.
After the damage is done, yeah.
Well, as you said, Mary, we know that Vermont has a significant elderly population, I'm one of them.
Unbalanced, Misha.
Well, you're, and we have a low birth rate as it is.
Yeah.
So, and people are moving out of the state. So that could
And we're not
mean-
building a welcoming platform for young
Environment.
families to come here. It's almost like a sign has been put up like, don't have kids, don't come here. So the courts have decided, and in Vermont, they very clearly say these things. I'm going to be completely honest. Most states have decided to prefer childbirth over abortion. And under Casey versus Planned Parenthood, a national Supreme Court case, it was Sandra Day O'Connor who said states can prefer childbirth over abortion in public policy. Now, that means you can fund pregnancies, you can fund assistance for young mothers. You can do things that are not equal, right? And say to you can have permit processes where you can have 4 bedrooms because you're planning on a larger family instead of where we have 2 bedrooms or
As long
whatever.
as you can afford it.
As long as you can. But in those states, they can afford it. They keep their property taxes low so families can grow.
No,
All right,
I-
but very clearly, and they say this, Judge Hilton Dyer said it in 1986. He said, Vermont, unlike other districts, does not prefer childbirth over abortion. We are a state that has decided abortion is a high priority for us.
And who's, other than Planned Parenthood, who makes money off of this,
It's their business.
who is behind this? Who is supporting this?
Sadly, the UVM Medical Center came down in support, the
Oh, I
Vermont
know.
Medical Society, but they've all been co-opted by Planned Parenthood. They pal around with Planned Parenthood. They've gotten themselves, Planned Parenthood has affluence and influence thanks to our own taxpayer dollars. It's important for the listeners to understand that we gave them an additional $800,000 when the Title X monies dried up for last year. And immediately after being granted that $800,000 to fill in the other, there's $1.4 million at least a year that they get
From Vermont taxpayers?
right now from Vermont.
That's nonsense.
They've been getting it. So some of that used to be from the federal government, and now, but it's all our taxpayer dollars. So it's 1.4, whether it comes from the federal or the state. But immediately after that, they moved $1 million to their action fund. So they're getting ready for the ground fight on this constitutional amendment. So it's going to be a David and Goliath type fight with our own taxpayer dollars.
That's just what I was going
Yeah.
to say. They know how to work the game, don't they?
Well, they have successfully taken over the legislature. In fact, the new Speaker of the House is a former Planned Parenthood employee.
Is that Molly?
It is
No.
Jill Krawinski,
Oh, yes.
representative from Burlington. So,
Yes.
so they have the halls of power. Their lobbyist is a former majority leader, Lucy LaRiche. So they know the players. They also play heavy hardball at election time. So they really bully.
With our tax dollars?
They have to raise for political funds. They have to raise separately. But when you get this much money to run your enterprise, it's not too hard to fundraise for the special projects, because it's a base that you can count on. They're very well to do, and their influence in the Northeast is just beyond belief, and they're terrifying to candidates who want to help Vermont.
Yeah, I would think so. This is frightening.
It is.
And it goes against human nature. And we need more young people in Vermont. We don't need to be aborting them.
Well, and at least can we level the playing field and have, so one of my favorite programs I've heard about in Massachusetts is is at the colleges. That's when most girls find themselves pregnant and seeking an abortion.
In college?
Yeah, they just get there, they're out of the parents' house, there's a lot of sexual behavior and missteps made, drinking and the whole thing. So they find themselves pregnant, it looks like their career and this baby are at odds, and it looks impossible. And definitely you have a boyfriend pressuring, right? He doesn't want to pay child support, he wants to finish his college education, blah, blah, blah. But there are places where the colleges themselves are ready for that, and they have daycare and they have support systems so that you can have your baby and get your education. That would be a nice step for Vermont.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I like the concept. It's just one more thing for the taxpayers to pay for.
I will always consider life a good investment.
Well said, Mary.
And a happy, healthy mother, because I think abortion leads to,
distress.
it's a terrible day in any woman's life to have an abortion. You've made a choice that you have to live with forever. And when you don't even know what that's like, I think it negatively impacts health.
I'm sure.
And there's difficulties with having a baby. Absolutely, we all know that who've had children, which is why we would encourage, marriage and family and ready for it, because it's big.
Well, you know what? This brings me to a topic that I think is really important as well, and that is family structure and parenting in today's world. Now, I'm sure, folks, that there are some wonderful families, wonderful parents out there. But then there are also those who may be on drugs or,
yes.
the families, the parents, or unemployed or depressed, or maybe they didn't come from a good situation in their own lives to start with. Maybe they made a lot of mistakes, but they ended up having children. Maybe they got divorced and things didn't go well. Who knows? There could be any number of reasons why it's difficult to raise children. But what more important responsibility is there? Teaching your children, to be kind and work ethic and personal responsibility and accountability for the things you do, and teaching them how to be, independent. I've said this on the show before. Those who view this show often probably are tired of hearing me say it, but I just bless my mom every day of my life. She was tough. Mm-hmm. She was loving, but she was tough, Mary. And she grew up with a mom who was tough. Mm-hmm. And I learned the hard way. And if I didn't do what I was told, mm-hmm. I felt it. And in a healthy way,
But we're also missing that connection. The nuclear family's been hurt by the help we used to get from grandparents. Remember, I mean, there's a lot wrong, and it starts with not respecting human life. I mean, that's my viewpoint. That's why I do the work I do. Life is precious. Life can be hard, but like you said earlier, the joy is in life. And
yes, and we learn from the tough times. They're not. I've had my share, and I know it's not easy. But when you get through it, when you finally work your way through it, you feel so much stronger and mm-hmm. better about yourself.
Well, these are all values I think our kids are just not they're not hearing some of these things.
What are the expectations in the school system for productivity mm-hmm. and acting in a responsible manner and being courteous and paying attention and being kind to others, and these are all parts of being a human being in a society.
Well, you're right, but Well, all we can do is keep trying to educate. We don't get a chance to be in the schools. Planned Parenthood is there, so they have an unfair advantage over those little minds.
How can you combat that? I know this has been an issue for years, that Vermont Right to Life cannot get into the classroom, but Planned Parenthood can.
They get into with their peer educators. So if there's a debate, I'll tell you one story. This is ridiculous. I had a young pro-life college student at UVM call me and say, a bunch of us are pro-life here, but we're so outnumbered. And she said, can you help us? And I said, well, sure, let's ask the other side to have a debate. And I said, I'll get you somebody that'll debate, or I'll come myself. And so she said, oh, that would be great. I'm going to go to the debate society. We're going to get the pro-choice group on campus. And you know what the answer was? The answer was, we can't have a debate with you because there's only one side to the issue.
Oh, really?
Really.
Oh, isn't that interesting? What are they afraid of? That
What are they
won't
afraid
debate?
of? And can you imagine thinking, after all these years, and it's like a number one issue for every presidential campaign, and in some even local races, that they think there's only one side to the debate. That's brainwashed. However, we were going to go back and fight that and try to get into the debate, and then COVID hit, so you can't do anything. I can't do anything till we're opened up again.
We have lost so much ground. I don't know how many states are like Vermont. I don't know how many of them are dealing with these really sad issues that are not giving the best to our young people in terms of what will help them to get through a productive life.
Well, there's 2 states, and I'm going to guess that I have this right. I know Louisiana for sure, and I think Kentucky. Now, they, ironically, in the absolutely opposite of Vermont, have passed legislation that says nothing in their constitution will ever speak to abortion.
Wow.
So there's how some other states look at the world. There's Ohio and one other state, Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem's the governor of North Dakota or something like that. Anyway, 2 states have banned abortions on babies because they have Down syndrome. So there's progress in respect for life and understanding so much more than Vermont.
Pardon my ignorance. From what you just said, I'm assuming that professionals can know that
yes.
a child has Down
Yes.
syndrome
And, yeah.
before they're born.
Yes. And usually very late in the pregnancy, too.
Is that something in the brain? Is that what?
It's in the DNA. They can test the amniocentesis tests and other tests.
Really?
Yeah, they can find. They know everything. They know all kinds of things, and often they're wrong. That's one of the things people need to understand. I have so many people who have told me they were told their child was going to have every imaginable, incompatible with life, genetic problem, and baby's born like scoring 9 on the APGAR, perfectly healthy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. That happens a lot.
That's very interesting.
Well, science is flawed. And I remember one woman who went back and they said, look, you said I was going to have a boy and I was going to have a life of struggle with this child. And this baby's a girl and she's perfectly healthy. And they said, oh, well, we make mistakes sometimes. And they had wanted her they pressure her to have an abortion. It's a lot of pressure. So there are states that are totally different than Vermont. But what Planned Parenthood is trying to do with Proposal 5 is kick off a recipe for other states in case Roe v. Wade falls at the national level. So they openly stated that Vermont's a bright star in the abortion world and that they want other states to follow our example.
Wow.
So there's a lot at stake here, and there's a lot at stake personally for every person who lives in Vermont with what this Proposal 5 could mean. So please visit our website, find out more. We have been delivering our brochure all across the state, and we have thousands more. If you want to be able to share with your neighbors and friends, just contact us. But
what is in there, Mary?
This is This is the case against Proposal 5.
Oh,
I'll make
okay.
sure you have one.
Okay.
It's the language of it, it's the process to get it to the voters, and then it's some big reasons why it is a bad, bad, bad idea.
I don't remember Vermont being like this when I was in college here.
Well, but I remember fighting the ERA in 1986, so it's had some very big roots. Planned Parenthood's always had strong roots in Vermont. Very strong. It goes way back. It goes back to the Eugenics Project. I don't know if you were familiar with the apology that was just issued in the Vermont House, apologizing for the state-sanctioned program of rounding up poor people and forcibly sterilizing them.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that was a horrific time. It targeted Abenaki Indian tribes and French-Canadian immigrants, but they had all one thing in common: they were poor. And it was, the programs were run through the government, supported by UVM. The Professor Henry Perkins was on payroll there, and so UVM has issued an apology, and the UVM library, and now they're involved in Proposal 5. So we're going to be telling them, hang on to the language, save the pen that the governor signs it with, because we're going to be apologizing again. This is atrocities against human beings. I don't think, Linda, under Proposal 5, you could prevent any kind of experimentation on an unborn child. They are nothing. They are nothing.
The children are nothing?
An unborn child has no rights under our new statute, and if this Proposal 5 goes in, there'll be no constitutional protection for an unborn child.
How can the people who are supporting these kinds of things live with themselves?
They are proud of themselves, Linda.
Is it because they're making money off of it?
No, this is their philosophy. This is their life's work. The Planned Parenthood philosophy is their philosophy. It's a population control philosophy, absolutely.
Well, we don't have a huge population in the state of Vermont.
We have a governor asking for 100,000 more people to move here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we're paying for so many things. You know, the people who are working are paying for, I believe, without going into detail at this moment, paying for a lot of things that we don't even believe in or that we don't support.
I know. I don't know if it's because so many of our more traditional folks have left Vermont, or
that could be,
or if they're just not paying attention. I don't know. But it's like watching a runaway circus right now in the State House. Every bad idea that could possibly be floated is not only introduced as a bill, but being taken up.
Wow.
And now they've asked for some more time. They want to, just today, I'm not sure what the decision will be, but they want to stay longer and then come back this summer. I mean, the damage is just...
Finish the damage.
Continue the damage. And then we have a whole nother session to survive. It's very frightening.
Where do all of these ideas, expensive, destructive ideas, come from? And who is actually benefiting? It's not the people of Vermont in general.
No, I think you know, Linda, that Vermont's been used as a place to experiment national ideas, you know. So we had to be one of the first, well, we were the first legislature to pass legalizing doctor-prescribed suicide. 2 other states had done it by referendum, but we were the first state to legally, through the legislative process. So we had to be that. Then we had to legalize marijuana. We've had, and we're now looking at legalizing prostitution, and it just goes on and on. So Vermont's small. It's an easy media market. It's cheap, and we have willing co-conspirators in the State House. I guess they don't know if they think they're going to be written up in the history books, but I'm going to make sure they are, not the way they think. I mean, we have to document what was said. So in the office right now, we have at least as big as this table volumes of taking the tapes that, you know, you were in committee and you somebody had to be making sure the CD was in, and we're taking those tapes and transcribing everything they say.
Wow.
It's a huge job.
Boy,
but we have really found words we can throw back at them. It was very casual, very sloppy. And I think this is important for your listeners. If they can get Proposal 5, do you think they're going to be done amending the Vermont Constitution? Can you imagine what they're going to think of? They want things permanently at rest for discussion. And so there are so many reasons to oppose this. There are so many reasons to become educated. And I know it's a long way away, but we've got to start now. And we have to tell neighbors and friends, and we've got to get information out. And it's not just about being pro-life or pro-abortion or pro-choice. It's way bigger than that.
So what would you, if you were to summarize in just one sentence, what we have to help people to understand and acknowledge about what's happening?
On Proposal 5 or in the State House, or both?
Either one.
Yeah, you have to get involved, and you have to be bold. We certainly can't be canceled. We certainly can't allow them to shut us up. I know they're going to say everything I'm saying is not true, but everything I'm saying is something they can't prove isn't true. We are wading into a situation that could be so dangerous for Vermonters. If you want to stay here, you better get active, because you may not be able to. I mean, we can't be promising the world. You say, oh, we're going to guarantee Vermonters personal reproductive autonomy. That means everyone who moves here is going to have free access to all these things. And what will it mean as the science continues to take us to very strange places? Can women sell their babies for, how far can this possibly go? I don't know, Linda.
To the moon.
I can tell you that we brought in some expert testimony that was just completely alarming. We had testimony, let's see, human cloning, gestational surrogacy, trafficking in human embryo creation, designer babies. This is what national experts warned us could really happen here. And this was presented to the committees, and they just, no.
That is...
And one senator said, oh, yes, it's going to be exciting to think where this could all take us, where science will take us in years to come. Here's a quote from Planned Parenthood's, she did a video. Paige Fieser is their public affairs organizer, Planned Parenthood's. She said Proposal 5 will open up a range of different questions for future lawmakers for years to come.
Wow.
So, this is where I know what you've been doing is so important, Linda, is trying to teach people about the Constitution. But you don't fool around with your personal agenda items with our founding document. You leave it alone.
Yes. And
it doesn't meet the test of a good constitutional amendment. It is vague. It's supposed to be clearly understood. For the language itself should be clear. This is not. The ramifications should be obvious. They are not. So this fails every test of a constitutional amendment.
Well, there's another huge problem, and that is that our youth are not being properly taught.
And I know you've tried, Linda, I know.
And I'm still trying.
Good.
Learning about what this country was founded to be and why we have the laws that we have and why we have the rights, individual rights and freedoms and opportunities, and why the federal government is curtailed in what it can do. Get out of education, federal government, get out of health care, and let us do our thing. And another major thing that bugs the living daylights out of me is all the interference by government that adversely affects private enterprise. let private enterprise flourish, let it do its thing, and get out of its way.
Well, let's think about this, Linda. They're burdening businesses that are independent businesses, but we're going to make sure that one business, Planned Parenthood, and the business of abortion is completely unfettered, completely unsupervised, unregulated, and unfettered. So it's ironic in every way, shape, or form, and you know that there are none so blind as those who will not see, and the makeup of the House and Senate right now is they're just blockheads. They're just not. Talk about not understanding their role. Now they're abdicating much of their role to these commissions that they keep forming.
Yes.
And by putting it in the Constitution, they're abdicating their right to understand going forward what's best. The science is going to take us to understanding that our brothers and sisters in the womb are fully human and fully alive, and we're going to be moving the moment of viability back from 23, 24 weeks, back further and further, because that's where we're headed. And they will be closing the door on trying to recognize the fetal personhood of an unborn child.
It is fascinating how quickly, oops.
Is that singing happy birthday?
Oh, no. It is fascinating. I usually turn this off, Mary. Oh, dear. Sorry, folks. How do I? There. I hope that did it. Sorry. I hope I did it. That's what happens when you're old. That's my excuse. What would you advise the viewers to do? Now, you suggested a couple of things, but as far as paying attention to what is going on, and also asking those who are elected to represent us to keep us informed with what it is they're doing, and then get feedback from us, because they're not there just for their own good, they're there for our good.
Well, certainly COVID has made a lot of that difficult. I mean, once upon a time, we could go to a legislative breakfast, and those who cared could be there. But shows like yours are very helpful. I think we have to get through this stretch, and hopefully we can get back to having more one-on-one conversations with our legislators. But it's really not enough. Everybody has to examine whether they are the ones who should run for office. And very carefully look, oh, by the way, really, we need people to run for select boards and school boards. This kind of liberal thinking is creeping into every level of state government. We are looking at some seats for select board spending $5,000 and $10,000 just to get one of those seats. Yes, they're trying. There's an organization called Emerge, and it's run by former Governor Madeleine Kunin. And she's training activist women to run for every level of state government. She was behind Molly Gray, our new lieutenant governor. She was behind Jill Krawinski, the new Speaker of the House, all very connected to Planned Parenthood in a radical, very radical far-left agenda.
So is she grooming them?
Yes, and with money, with a lot of money.
Okay.
To how to run for office, and then so they have been very successful. I think 79% of their attendees to this Emerge camp have won a seat somewhere.
Wow.
And it's all starting at the lowest local level and moving on up. So we need to be looking at our select boards. We need to be looking at dog catcher, whatever, get involved. School board, very important to get on your school board.
School board,
and so we've let some of these things really slide. We're all too busy, and the more the more taxes we have to pay and all that, the busier we get.
The harder it is.
It's very difficult, and it's onerous.
The thing is, what are you getting for your taxes?
a proposal 5 so you can pay more. So anyway, those are things that people need to just start doing, or at least be aware. But one thing I would caution is that some of them, be careful, because don't take out our best and brightest in the State House. Here's another thing I really recommend, and we asked people to do this. The 4 members of the Senate who said no, we asked everybody to thank them very much, because it's not easy to go against this tidal wave of
To stand solid for what you stand for.
Exactly right. And let me tell you, the gratitude was really there from those senators who are going to be singled out now for voting no, and pressured and fought against it at their next election.
Yep.
And so for your members of the House, pay attention. And when they do the things that you like, please thank them. And please don't run against those that are fighting for us the best they can. They'll never be perfect. That'll never happen.
I think part of the problem, Mary, is that unless you are on your little cell phone or on your computer and paying attention to Vermont Daily and Rob Roper's Ethan Allen Institute.
And True North.
True North.
But Vermont Daily Chronicle is a great source of news. Yeah.
Yes.
Look it up.
There are some great resources to help you to have a perspective on what is happening in our state.
Yeah, it's a responsibility you have to take unless you're planning to move, really. I mean, because it's going to become impossible to stay unless we start fighting. I mean, and we're going to start fighting. We're going to fight. If you want to become a member of Vermont Right to Life and get more information, don't hesitate to look us up online, and we'll keep you informed. We'll keep you informed of the progress on this Proposal 5 and direct you to some other great resources. And here's how I really feel about it. Linda, if I have just one more minute.
Sure you do.
I think everything's an opportunity. So this Proposal 5 is an opportunity for us to reach every single Vermonter with a pro-life message. I don't think Vermonters have any idea that our unborn would be nothing, and that a fetus is nothing in the state of Vermont. I think there's more, they may consider themselves pro-choice, but they do not consider themselves pro-abortion. And so we're going to use their attempt to ruin our Constitution, and I really believe that. I believe they will ruin our founding document. And we're going to use that as an opportunity to put the positive pro-life message in every household and see if we can't bring more people, shine a light on.
Good. I think that's really important, and I applaud you for all that you do, Mary, all these years. I don't know how you do it, but it is critically important, folks, for you to pay attention to what is happening in the legislature. And we do have legislators up in Franklin County who write letters, to the newspapers explaining what kinds of bills are being addressed and so forth. And so if you don't get the local papers, you might consider that. But Vermont Right to Life is a long-time, wonderful organization, and I urge you to support them and be aware of what is transpiring in this state. There's too much going on that is not in the best interest of the people of this state, as far as I see it. And it breaks my heart. Because we can do better than that. And but you know what? It's up to we, the people who built this nation, knew that if we, the people, were not vigilant and involved in government, that we would lose. And we are losing, folks. So stand up and get involved. Mary, thank you once again so much for joining me on this show. You always bring so much really important information. I don't know how you keep it all in your head.
No, that's my job, and I'm very happy to be here, and especially happy to be here on your birthday.
And thank you so much.
You are welcome.
I absolutely love these. I'm blessed. Thank you, Mary.
Yes.
God bless you.
Yeah.
And folks, God bless you out there, and please try to make a difference and stand up for life, and make sure you're doing the great parenting that's so important. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.